Welcome back to A Numbers Game with Ryan Grodowski. Thank you guys for being here. Happy Thursday. Remember how I mentioned to you in my last episode that we're coming to the end of the year. So Spotify and Apple Playlists were going to put their end of the year numbers. Well, I said that on Monday and it came out on Wednesday that they said, what your number one podcast and song and singer and all the rest artists were. And they had an interesting, Spotify had an interesting thing this year they've never done before, was they guessed your age by what music you listen to. They guessed my age was 68 years old. I am not hip, I guess. Like I guess I need to diversify. There's a lot of classic rock on my playlist, from Ozzy Osbourne and Linda Ronstadt and Fleetwood Mac and the Carpenters and Bruce Springsteen. Like, there's a lot of that going on. I might need to just spruce it up with some Taylor Swift or Sabrina Carpenter. I don't know. But 68 was kind of rough to get the Social Security numbers thrown at you. That's where your mind is. So thought it was funny. Hopefully my podcast came into your top 5 list. If it hasn't, please like and subscribe to this podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get this podcast. I'd love to be in your top 5 come next year. We have a lot of great end of the year episodes. I'm so excited about a big announcement coming next year at the end of this month, rather, and the game next year. Big announcement, but we have a lot of fun episodes because it's December. There's only so much politics people can really sit there and take. So we're going to do a lot of politics, but we have an episode with a priest right around Christmas time, my priest, actually. So that'll be a fun, interesting conversation. We'll have one of my consultant friends who are going to come on to talk about what it's like to run a campaign, to be part of a campaign, what it's like to win. We have questions from the audience that we're going to ask for them. And also I'm going to have, this is so great. I'm so excited for this. I have I have a few Gen Z employees. I think I have 7 Gen Z employees. So I'm actually going to hold a contest on this podcast with 3 of them. I'm going to offer them cash to quiz them about millennial and Gen X culture and to see who can get it right. And it's going to be great. I'm so excited for it. Let the public roasting begin. They know what they're involved with like this. So it's not going to be too hard. It's going to be very basic stuff, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing how much they know about the world that existed before streaming. So I'm very, very excited. Anyway, let's talk about politics for a second. There was a special election in the Tennessee's 7th congressional district where Republican Matthew Van Epps won by a 9-point margin against Democrat Afton Ben, I think is how I pronounce her name. She was a little bit crazy. Anyway, he won 54-45. So congratulations to the future Congressman Matt Van Epps. Now, it was a solid victory. 9 points is a decent margin, but remember, it's a district that Trump won by 22 points last November. It's not a great place where you want to be for Republicans in this one special election, but it also is not where you want to be when you look at the overall change that's been happening in all these special elections throughout this year. This was just a 13-point swing towards the Democrats, but it spells what's coming up in the future and what's been going on in the past and where voter sentiment is. Now, here's the thing of why. Now, normally, listen, you shouldn't put too much emphasis in any one special election. This election was different because it had a midterm turnout. In 2022, Congressman Mark Green, the Republican, won his seat by 22 points. It was 180,822 votes. In this election, where Matthew Van Epps won by 9 points, there was 179,899 votes. Almost basically a 1,000 vote difference. It was a midterm turnout for a special election. The Democrat candidate, who was very far left, received 81,000 votes. That's 66% of all the votes Kamala Harris won, while Van Epps got about 48% of all the votes that Trump received in the district. Not great. And it's just not a turnout thing. The turnout is very, very high for Democrats, right? Democrats are super engaged. But there's clearly movement among independent voters who are very worried about the economy and dealing with the aftermaths of Biden's inflation. It is like, a bad smell that's lingering after a couple of days of having food left out or spoiled milk. Like I think voters really believe Trump was going to reduce overall prices, not just slow inflation down, which he's been successful at, but reduce prices and go to maybe a deflationary period for a little while. That clearly hasn't happened. The job market is very worrisome for young people. We've had tons of episodes about this kind of content. Now, there have been 62 special elections in the last year, both for state House, state Senate, and Congress, right? state legislative and congressional. And Democrats have overperformed in 2024 62 special elections by an average of 11 points. That is historic by any single party in recent history, right? That is a lot. And no amount of mid-decade gerrymandering is going to fix it. Unless, I guess, if the VRA Section 12 is Section 2 rather is overturned, and we have states like Georgia and Alabama, Mississippi all jumping in and Florida redistrict all their states. Unless that happens, and I still think even if that happens, it's not enough to sit there and stop a Democratic wave from taking the House. I didn't think it was going to be this extreme a couple weeks ago, or even a couple months ago. But I looked at the 2017 to 2018 special elections, and Democrats that year, in that gigantic wave, only led in specials by 6 points. Remember, right now it's by 11 points. If the midterm elections were to happen today, it is almost guaranteed that Democrats will perform at nearly the same percentage, if not greater than they performed in 2018. The good thing for Republicans is that the election isn't tomorrow and things can change. Now, let me make a point about the recent past. In the year of 2023, there were dozens of special elections for both state legislature and Congress, and Democrats overperformed by almost 4 points, right? 4 points from where they had performed in 2020, which was already a very good year for Democrats. The following year, in 2024, there were also dozens of special elections ahead of the presidential election, and Republicans outperformed their performance in 2020 by 2 points. So there was a 6-point swing between just 1 year in favor of Republicans ahead of the presidential election. A 5 to 6 point swing, if it happened next year ahead of the midterms, it wouldn't be enough to save the House Republicans, but it would definitely move off Democrats from winning seats that are just lean Republican, or seats that Trump won by 8 or 9 points and maybe not by 20 points, right? It wouldn't be as bad. They wouldn't have to sit there and defend as many seats if this swing starts coming into next year. We will have to sit there and see. Republicans have been very effective at gerrymandering as well. This is something that this race really put me in touch with. Is just how effective. Now, in the Tennessee 7 race, which was part of Nashville and then a lot of exurb, suburbs, and rural communities, the parts of Nashville, right? Nashville won 61 points for the Democrats. Nashville itself swung 20 points more from where it was in 2024. The rural and exurb and suburb areas swung a little less than 10 points. So there's clearly heavy concentration and energy among Democrats in Democratic strongholds, which means you'll see, in a state like New York or New Jersey, places that are super Democratic, having crazy high turnout, affecting statewide elections, but not necessarily changing the course of some swing districts or some lean Republican districts who are mostly comprised of the exurbs and suburbs. I think that because the gerrymandering has been so effective in places like North Carolina, in Texas, in Florida, I don't think Republicans are going to be dealing with that big of a calamity where they're going to see Trump plus 10 seats flipping. I don't think that's in the cards. I think that this is, where we're looking at what seats are in danger is districts that Trump won by 5 points, 6 points, those kinds of seats, which is still quite a few, right? And you're going to have to really depend on Republican congressmen having deep loyalties into those seats and into those districts and into those areas they've been in for hopefully a long time. They've been working their constituents. I think that's a really, really important part. Now, part of the reason I believe that this has happened, that those seats will be protected, is not just from this one special. In Virginia, in the state legislative during the governor's races, Republicans won every seat that Trump won by more than 10 points. So if they were fine in Virginia, which was a catastrophic turnout for Republicans, I think they'll be fine nationwide. That's what I think. I know many people are sitting there and saying, what does my seat look like? What would change? What's going to happen? I have spent time sitting there and breaking down the map as I see what happened if next year looked a lot like 2018. That's going to come up next. So there's no definition of what a wave election is. Like, it's not like if you do this percentage or that percentage or this many seats, it's considered a wave. It's very subjective to really what people sit there and insist is a wave. In my opinion, you have to win about 24 seats or more for it to be considered a wave, right? I don't think winning 9 seats is a wave election. I think winning 20 to 60 seats is a wave election, right? And since in the last 2 decades, there have been 4 wave elections: 2006, 2008, 2010, and 2018. In those elections, Democrats had 3 waves in 2006, 2008, and 2018. Republicans had 1 in 2010. In the Republican wave year in 2010, Republicans netted 63 House seats, which is absurdly high, right? It doesn't happen. In the subsequent House elections in 2018, Democrats won about 40 seats. And in 2006 and 2008, they won, I think, 21 and 25. So they want to combine about 47, 48 seats. Those types of elections where candidates win, or parties rather win, dozens of seats, 30, 40, 50, 60, are becoming increasingly rare, which is why you saw them clustered together in 2006, 2008, and 2010. And then it takes another decade for it to even really happen again. Part of the reason it was able to happen again was because when Donald Trump showed up on the scene, turnout in midterms spiked through the roof, and they've been spiking through the roof ever since. Midterms used to have like 35% turnout from where they were in the presidential elections, and now they're closer towards 50, 55%, and in some states north of 55%. There's also been a settling as terms of realignments. Now, there are still some realignments happening in 2024. You saw Trump's surge with Hispanic voters, and they were very concentrated in very, very blue areas, which didn't result in many seats flipping, but they got a lot closer. In 2010, Southern seats, right? You may not even remember this. Most of Arkansas had a Democratic congressman. 3 out of the 4 seats was Democratic congressman. States like Tennessee had tons of Democratic congressmen. Mississippi had 3 of their 4 seats were Democratic congressmen. Alabama had more. Georgia had more. Texas had tons, or not tons, but they had a handful of white, Southern, middle, rural Democrats that represented those areas. That was very normal for decades until finally those voters who had voted for Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon and George W. Bush finally said, you know what, why do I have a Democratic congressman? Ticket splitting really slowed down immensely, and Republicans made gigantic gains throughout the entire prairie states, throughout the Midwest, and throughout the South. Likewise, in 06 and 08, Democrats, they gained seats in Connecticut, where Republicans used to have 3 seats. They gained seats in New Hampshire and in Maine. They gained seats in areas that you would have thought, I didn't know there were Republicans there as recently as 2006, 2008, as well as seats in Northern California, where Republicans still held seats, like in the suburbs, not too far away from San Francisco, not directly San Francisco, but more like towards Sacramento. But those areas had Republican congressmen that don't exist anymore. So that kind of settling has already happened. And I think that because of that has already happened, it is unlikely to happen again, which is why I said we're not going to see an effect where, Republicans lose, Montana or Wyoming. That's just, it's not really in the cards. And because there are not any Republicans in Connecticut or any Republicans in Rhode Island or other deep blue areas, there's limitations to how much their gains can really manifest in these House elections. So I played a game for this podcast where I sat there and said, what would a election like 2010, if it happened for Republicans, look like in terms of turnout and victories? What would it look like for Democrats if it was 2018? Because 2006, 2008, 2010, and 2018 had about the same exact margin, right? It was very, very close in favor of both Republicans and Democrats. It was about 8 points. So what would happen if Democrats won the election by 8 points? How many seats could they possibly gain? What would happen for Republicans if they had won an election by 8 points? I think because of how both gerrymandered some Republican states are, like Texas, like North Carolina, there are serious limitations to Democratic gains. I think if the election, my prediction, and the map is on the YouTube page, so if you're listening to this, you can turn on YouTube and I will show you what I think the map would look like. If the election were held and it was a Democrat plus 8 year, I think Democrats would win about 230 seats to Republicans 204 seats. Their gains would come in a lot of Midwestern places like, Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa. They would all see Democrat gains. Likewise, they'd also see gains. We're going to get gains because of California, because of gerrymandering, but you'll see gains in New York, definitely in Pennsylvania, they would see some gains, and Virginia. Virginia is another area I think Democrats have the ripe option of making gains. Florida, the only seat that I could think of them even coming close to is Anna Paulina Luna. That's her name. Sorry, no offense to Congressman Anna Paulina Luna, but that is the only seat that I could see them and say if they have a phenomenal year and an incredible election turnout, that I would say she could be in trouble. But probably not even her. I put her as a possible Democrat pickup if it was an incredible year, but she's really the only one from Florida. Texas, I don't see them winning any Republican members of Texas, no matter what, how they're licking their chops and saying they over gerrymandered. I just don't see how that's possible. Arizona would have a few Democratic congressman pickups, and Democrats would protect their incumbents in most seats. There could be one or two surprises. Someone gets indicted, somebody gets sick, or somebody says something on the campaign trail that affects them. I can't count for that. But if that happened, certainly those changes would happen. The most interesting thing is if it was a Republican +8 year, Republicans would have the chance to pick up 53 seats. Now you're like, Ryan, that is so crazy. That's not possible. That's even more than the Tea Party wave. Here's why I think it is. I think Republicans would, one, hold on to all their incumbents, and they would make gains in specifically Hispanic districts that they were. That's the only way you're going to get to a Trump or Republican +8 year. Make gains in Hispanic districts that Trump did very well in and exceed those numbers. Remember, Trump won by 2, so this would be an excess of 6 more. You would see some gerrymandering on the Democratic side, which would which wouldn't do enough to protect them, right? So like Nevada is a perfect example. Nevada has 4 seats. 3 of them are gerrymandered to protect Democrats, and Republicans came close to picking up 2 of those 4 seats last term. If it was a Republican +8 year, all 3 of those seats would swing Republican. Likewise, Oregon would probably lose 2 of their Democratic seats because they just gerrymandered a little too much and spread themselves a little too thin. That's where I would see Republicans make those gains to get to such a high number, because I don't think that Democrats did enough I think that Democrats took for granted that certain populations could never move, and 2024 obviously proved that they are moving. So that's where I have that estimate from. If it was a Tea Party-like wave, 53 seats for Republicans, and I think it's a 2018 year, it's about 231 seats for Democrats. Majorities for both parties, but I think that Democrats have a lot less to work with than I think that they used to. And I don't foresee a Tea Party-style 60-seat wave, even in a great year, kind of happening again for the foreseeable future. And for Democrats, I think they're kind of stuck in a position where they're maybe looking at 20 seats if it's an incredible year, but they're not going to get to where they used to, which is 40 seats. Anyway, I think it's fascinating. And I think that's really where we're looking at limitations and why there's going to be such heavy concentration going into next year on certain House seats, because there's fewer and fewer, which are swing seats. People are voting, fewer ticker splitting and less swing seats. And I think that there'll be immense concentration effort in just a few dozen, and then the other 400, it'll be in the bag one way or the other. Everyone can, spend the night, hanging out and not worrying about the election. Maybe for statewide elections, but not necessarily these independent House seats. All right. Next up is Ask Me Anything. Stay tuned. Now it's time for the Ask Me Anything segment. If you want to be part of the Ask Me Anything segment, email me Ryan@numbersgamepodcast.com. That's Ryan@numbersgamepodcast.com. Love getting these questions. I answer them every episode. I get to all your questions either privately through email or I answer them on the show. So here's the first one. It comes from Jeffrey Dean. He writes, Ryan, thank you for your great episode with John from Breitbart. Are you familiar with the concept of social inflation? It's a big driver of insurance increases you referenced in the episode. Several states are looking to mitigate the nuclear verdicts driving the situation. South Carolina has some good examples involving restaurants and quote, liquor liability. Very interesting, with more needing to be done. Keep up the great work, Jeff. Okay, I did not know about social inflation before this email. I looked it up. Social inflation refers to the increase in claim severity above what could be anticipated under the usual scope of economic inflation and claims trends. This is from a website. This is from an insurance website. Here are 4 factors fueling social inflation. One is desensitization to large verdicts and media impact. Second is negative public sentiment towards corporate accountability. Third is erosion of tort reform. And last, and I didn't even think of this, attorney tactics of litigation funding. Basically, attorneys, ambulance chaser attorneys, they're spending over $1 billion a year on advertising and targeting certain areas, certain venues for lawsuits, areas they think they can win a lot of money, which is causing insurance overall to spike in several parts of our country if they think they can get this, because that's their business. It's causing all of our rates to go up. I did not know about the social inflation. I'm going to look deeper into this and when talking about it. But Jeff, really, really enlightening. So thank you for that. Next question comes from Andrew Zimmerman. He writes, is there any data to suggest abortion was a strong motivating factor for Democrats in the 2025 election, or was it just a subset among cost of living and shutdown for federal workforce issues? In Virginia, the only statewide election we've had since overturning Roe v. Wade was 2023, which according to Public Access Project only had 39% turnout and only gave Democrats a slight majority in the House delegates. I live in District 75, a Richmond metro suburb district that does include the city of Hopewell. It swung from R+6 in 2023 to D+6 in 2025. Okay, so I looked this up. I looked up several different both expert analysis and exit polling and crosstabs, and abortion never made it as a top issue in anywhere that I was able to pull data from. About 60% of Virginians support access to abortion in most or all circumstances. 35% would be pro-life, wanting to restrict abortion in most and all circumstances, which is kind of where I thought it would be. Maybe it's a little higher, but it could also be higher because Democrat turnout was higher. The interesting thing was that more pro-choice voters voted Republican for governor than pro-life voters voted for the Democrat. According to CNN exit polls, 17% of pro-choice voters in Virginia voted for Winsome Sears, while only 11% of pro-lifers voted for Spanberg. So I mean, that's interesting, but no, I don't think that it was enough of a driver. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that it was, a big issue for, like abortion is always a big issue for some people. I think that predominantly, though, it was cost of living, government shutdown, and just hating Trump and excessive Democratic turnout. I mean, I looked really hard for it. I couldn't find it. So, but hey, there's always another election in 2 years. So hopefully your area will swing back towards Republicans. Anyway, that's it. That's it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening to this podcast. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube. Now my videos are on YouTube. If you like this episode and you like this show, please give me a 5-star review. It really helps get the word out. Thank you guys, and I will see you all next week.